Okay, so we're live now. So consider this graph, no? Consider this plane as the xy plane or the rectangular coordinate plane. By the way, am I clearly heard by everybody? Yes? Maliwanag ba? Okay naman? O, kasi baka nag-aagawan ng signal sa live and signal sa telecon. But ako lang ang nakakonect ngayon kasi tulog pa mga kapatid. So I enjoy the connection. Okay. So dito sa xy plane, to give you an idea of graphical analysis, imagine that there is a graph, no? Imagine that there is a function here. So this is the graph of a function. Let's say that is f of x. So the graph clearly shows its movement, right? Nakikita natin na habang habang papunta ang values of x or habang ang x ay patuloy sa pag-increase, nakikita din natin ang y na parang paakyat siya, no? Y goes higher. However, as we keep on decreasing values of x or negative infinity, we also observe that the values of y seem to be decreasing. Okay? But in the graphical approach kasi of functions, we are just limited to as to how the graph behaves. However, with the presence of the function itself, we can immediately identify with the graph and the function, makikilala natin kung paano siya mag-behave. So let's say for example, there is a particular value of x and I would like to emphasize, let's say this one is negative 2. So I'll draw an imaginary line. So this one is just imaginary line. So let's say for example, the values of x keeps on approaching this negative 2. What if the values of x ay palapit ng palapit sa negative 2 pero galing siya sa left? Yan na yung representation class ng ganito. X keeps on approaching negative 2 from its left. Okay? Medyo hindi maganda ang pagkasulat ko ng approaching symbol. So this symbol means approaching, no? So it approaches, x keeps on approaching negative 2 from its left. So ang ibig sabihin class ng left is these are the numbers less than negative 2. These are the numbers less than negative 2. Okay? So when you talk about numbers on the left, they're always less than the given number. And let's say for example there is another movement and that comes from the right of negative 2. So it means to say x keeps on approaching negative 2 pero galing sa right. Galing siya sa right, papunta sa negative 2, then you have here a positive sign. So whenever you encounter a negative sign, class, I would like to emphasize this one. Whenever you emphasize a negative sign here, you talk about the left-sided limit. So this one is the left-sided limit. However, when you see a positive sign right after the number negative 2, then you immediately talk about, okay, the right-sided limit. Okay, so ang ibig sabihin left and right ay tinatawag natin ngayon na one-sided limits. Itong dalawang ito, pag pinag-usapan mo na yung left and then you talk about the right, okay, then you are referring to one-sided limits. This left and right are what we call the one-sided limits. Okay, so when we talk about the limit itself, paano nga ba nagkaroon ng limit at ano ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng limit? Okay. In summary, when we talk about limit, it is just the behavior of f of x. We are just referring to how does f of x behaves. So going back to the illustration, when x keeps on, may naka-open microphone. Turn off. Turn off your microphone. Okay, kasi magulo. Okay, so limit just talks about how f of x or the given function behaves as x approaches a certain number c. Kaya nga sa representation natin, what is the limit of f of x as x approaches c? Itong c na to is a real number. So, ibig sabihin, c is just a representation of a number x. So, C refers to the value of x. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, habang habang nag-i-increase, let's say for example, when you talk about the left-sided limits and the right-sided limits, limit of f of x as x approaches negative 2 from the left, limit of f of x as x approaches negative 2 from the right. Ano daw ang ginagawa? Ano daw ang nangyayari? Okay? Habang ang values ng x ay nilalapitan ang negative 2, so in this case, c is negative 2. So when the values of x keeps on approaching negative 2 from the left, how are you going to describe the behavior of the function f? Or the other, how does f of x responds to the changes happening on x as it goes closer to negative 2 but greater than negative 2? So, ibig sabihin, these are numbers from the right of negative 2. So, if we see the symbol negative and we see symbol positive, then those are one-sided limits. So, ang ibig sabihin, pag nakita naman natin ito na yung tinatawag nating two-sided limits. Ito na yung weak 2. So, in the two-sided limits, nire-require niya ngayon, okay, requirement niya ngayon ang behavior ng one-sided limits. How the left and right behaves, are they equal? Do they both exist? Do they both exist? But let's take a look. Let's try to define the term exists. Sa nasa FB Live, pasensya kayo at medyo inuubo talaga ako. Bear with that, with that noise. Okay. Ang ibig sabihin ng term exists, okay, these are the terms kasi na posible na iniisip ninyo, ano kaya tinutukoy ni sir dito sa term na exists na to? Isa-isayin natin yung terms para maintindihan niyo kung anong ibig sabihin ng mga yun. Okay. Ang exists ay katumbas ng there must be a real number value. So, pag sinabi natin the limit exists, then there must be a real number. It must be a real number, a real limit. Okay. Other books will tell you might encounter this one. This is a real limit. So, a real number. And definitely, when you talk about infinity, okay, yung mga undefined, these are not real numbers. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, pag sinabi mong both exist, the limit from the left and right both exist, ibig sabihin, there's a real number value. And they're equal, sabi niya. So, pareho sila. So, kung ang limit ng left ay 6, dapat ang limit din daw ng right ay 6, so that the limit of the function in a two-sided limit is also 6. Okay? So, yes, maliwanag ba? You may speak. Anyway, di kayo naririnig sa FB Live pag nagsalita kayo. Maliwanag ba? Can I go proceed to the other? Just say yes. Ano yung magsalita? O sige, mag-move na ako. So in the definition now of this limit, ang ibig sabihin ngayon daw, two-sided versus one-sided limit, It must always be true. Okay? The two-sided limit of any function, let's say f of x, as x approaches c, will exist. Okay? It will exist if and only if, okay, very strong ang condition. Mag-exist lang daw yan kung ang limit from the left ay equal. Class, we use the symbol equal sign when we talk about real numbers. Okay? So, itong dalawang ito, ang limit, ang two-sided limits ay mag-exist lang or there is a real limit, a real number value. Kung totoo na ang limit ng left at right ay nag-exist, okay, it should be true that the limit of these two exists and equal. Itong dalawang ito ang condition. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, class, kung ang limit sa left, for example, is negative 2, ang limit sa right is 3, for example, then the limit of the two-sided limit, ito, does not exist. Let me cross out. However, if the limit from the left is negative 2 and the limit from the right is also negative 2, then the limit of the function is negative 2. Yun ang ibig sabihin niya. So, naggagayahan silang lahat. Therefore, it also follows that pag binaliktad mo yung condition, remember your logic, pag binaliktad mo ang condition, kung nag-exist ang limit of f of x as x approaches c, that is a two-sided limit, then it is also true that the left and right ay pareho din ang value. So let's say for example, ang limit, okay, ito yung mga dapat yung maintindihan na para sa pagdating ng quiz nyo on Friday ay hindi kayo maloka-loka. So let's say for example, ang limit of f of x as x approaches 10, for example, is equal to 6. And then you are asked, so what is the limit of f of x as x approaches 10 from the left? What is the limit of f of x as x approaches 10 from the right? The answer is simply 6. It follows now. Kasi kung ang limit ng two-sided ay nag-exist and that's the real limit 6, it follows that the one-sided limits must also be 6. Kasi it is being guaranteed by the condition na. Nakikita nyo na kasi sa condition na, sinabi mo mag-exist lang yan kung ang left at right ay pareho. O ngayon, naging real limit ang left, ang two-sided, naging real limit ang two-sided. So, ano ang mangyayari? Then it follows that the left and right must also be 6. Can you get the point there? Yes? So, ano naman ang condition dito? Hindi daw ibig sabihin na kung ang left at right ay nag-exist, ay ang two-sided limits daw ay nag-exist din. Hindi yun guarantee. Why? Because the condition is very strong. The condition is very strong, saying that whenever you encounter the term n, ito n. So, ibig sabihin nito, the absence of the other would mean not following the condition. So, kung nag-exist lang yan, sabi niya, pero hindi sila equal, then the two-sided limits will not exist. However, if they both exist and both equal, then definitely that real number will always be the limit. It's like this. Kung 6 nag-exist, so, ibig sabihin 16 yung dalawa. Pero it also follows, class, yung ibig kong sabihin kanina, let's say for example, the limit of g of x as x approaches 5 is, from the left for example, is 7. Then the limit of g of x as x approaches 5 from the right is, let's say, 10. Ano masasabi ninyo dito? Ang two-sided limits, ang left-sided limits and the right-sided limit ay nag-exist, right? Kasi 7 and 10 are real numbers, so they do exist. However, they are not equal. However, these two are not equal. 7 is not equal to 10. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, class, the limit of function g as x approaches 5, which is a two-sided limit, does not exist. Yan na yung DNE. Okay? Pag hindi pantay ang left at right, and they do not share the same value and they're not equal specifically, then the two-sided limits does not exist. So okay ba? Can you follow? Hello, St. Peter Damian, hindi kayo sumasagot. How am I going to direct myself? So, naiintindihan yan. Sige, hindi ako mag-move unless sabihin yung yes or no. Yes, Lujan. Yes. Di ba nakikita mo na wala akong given function? Wala akong binigay na equation ni f of x. Well, I'm just giving an idea na kapag ang nakuha nyong pag ang nakuha nyong limit ay hindi pantay, sabi niya, limit from the left, limit from the right ay 7. 7 left, yung right naman 10. So, hindi sila pantay, ang ibig sabihin, hindi talaga mag-exist yung limit ng function. Okay, on the two-sided limit. However, kung ang limit ng left, tulad ng f of x as x approaches 10 there, is 6. And limit of the function f of x as x approaches 10 from the right is also 6. So 6 and 6 are both existing, or they both exist kasi they are real numbers and they are equal. So ibig sabihin the two-sided limits is also 6. Maggagayahan silang lahat. Gets? That is with the presence of the function. Well, I did not give any function yet kasi we're about to go there. Ang gusto ko lang i-clarify yung mga basic ideas ng these rules. Okay? And then, when we now go to the graphical approach of this, kasi yun yung week 1 ninyo, graphical talaga siya. Ang ibig sabihin nito, class, is papansinin mo kung saan papunta yung value ng x. Saan papunta ang value ng y habang ang x ay papunta dun sa particular number. Is it from the left or the right? Do they meet each other? If they do not meet each other, then what does it mean? Okay? So, yun ang next natin. Now, going back to the graph. Okay? Mag-graph ako ulit. Magbigay ako ng graphical analysis. Mamaya pag-usapan natin yung enrichment activity ninyo. Diba? Yung graphical doon. Nangyari sa aking line. Wala. Okay, so in the graphical analysis of limits, ipapakita ko sa inyo kung kailan mag-exist at kailan hindi mag-exist ang limit when it comes to a two-sided limits. Okay, ganito lang yan. I'll use green as the first graph. So let's say for example, there is a graph here. And then, let's say, for example, there is a value. Kunwari, ito ay 1. So, nandito siya. And let's say, for example, this is 1. So, ang ibig sabihin nito, class, okay, makikita natin na ang graph, pinapakita ng graph dito, okay, that the limit, let's say this is the graph of function b. So let's say this is b of x. It shows that limit of b of x as x approaches 1 from the left. Okay? Saan papunta ang value ng y? Okay, tingnan niyo mabuti ito. Saan papunta ang value ng y habang ang x ay patuloy sa okay, nilalapitan niya ang 1 pero galing siya sa left. Ano ang nangyayari sa value ng b of x or the value of y? Saan naman papunta ang value ng b of x? What is your answer? Okay, tinan nyo yung graph. Where does the value of b of x go? Saan naman siya papalapit ng papalapit? The graph clearly shows that the value of b of x gets closer and closer to 1. Correct, Matthew. That is 1. Nakikita nyo, kitang-kita na kasi sa graph, class. Kung papalapit ka ng papalapit dyan kay 1 pero galing ka sa left, tinan mo ang behavior niya. Ganyan siya mag-behave. Okay, lapitan mo ang 1, sabi niya, pero galing ka sa left. Ano nangyayari sa y? Y gets closer and closer to 1. Okay? Next. So what about if when you talk about the graph of the right? So what is the limit of b of x as x approaches 1 from the right? The answer is, is it still 1? I think so. That is still 1. And paano siya naging 1? Kasi kapag titignan mo, paano ba mag-behave? Okay, x punta ka sa 1 pero galing ka sa right, sabi niya. Get closer and closer to 1 but you are moving from the right. So it means to say, paano naman mag-behave ang y or b of x? Kitang-kita mo na papunta naman ang b of x sa value ng 1 habang ang x ay papunta sa value ng habang ang x ay papalapit sa 1, ang value ng y naman ay papalapit naman sa 1. So that is their relationship. Okay? So, since they are the same, then we may now say that the limit of b of x as x approaches 1 is also 1. Why? Because left and right both exist and they are equal to 1. So it follows that the two-sided limit is also 1. Take note of that. Okay, but sir, does it mean that nakikita natin kasi sir dito sa graph na included yung 0.11. Paano sir pag excluded ang point na 1, 1? But before that, okay, magbigay pa ako ng maipasolve ako sa inyo. Let's say for example, this is 1, 2, let's say this is negative 3 and here, let's say that one is 1.2 dito. Ipasolve ko nga ito sa inyo and I want you to comment your answer. What is the limit of b of x as x approaches negative 3 from the left? Limit of b of x as x approaches negative 3 from the right? And what is the limit of b of x as x approaches negative 3? And I'm giving you just 10 seconds to comment your answer. And by the way, okay, hindi naman magpapakita sa FB Live ang inyong sagot kasi yung naka-share screen ako dun as is not the other answer. Not this screen of the Google Meet. It is the screen of the GeoGebra notes. Now, 5 seconds. What is your answer? Si Matthew Lambang, estudyante dito. St. Peter, Damian, ano nangyayari sa iba? You are not commenting, so you will not be given recitation points. Okay? Parang pinapakita nyo sa akin, hindi talaga kayo nagbasa. Dun sa particular lesson, we have the enrichment. The answer here is 1.2. Matthew is still correct. Okay, tingnan nyo ang nangyayari, class. It's all about the behavior. When you keep on approaching negative 2, then you are moving from the right, sabi niya. And you keep on approaching negative 2, however, you're moving from the left. What happens to the value of y? Yun lang ang tinasabi ng limit, class. What happens to the value of y as x keeps on approaching negative 3 from the left and the right? So when x keeps on approaching negative 3, so what happens to y? Sabi niya. The answer is, it's simply, y simply gets closer and closer to 1.2 from the right. And definitely, since they are the same, and they both exist, then the answer of the two-sided limit is also 1.2. So that's how quick it is when you are solving for a limit of a function, especially that whenever you see the limit, wala naman talagang, hindi siya nag-crack, no? There is endless. The graph is continuous. Hindi sila naghiwalay ng position. Ibig sabihin, there's no cut on the graph. So it means to say they will always meet. So can you imagine it in real life? For example, you're trying to meet someone, and then you suddenly meet on a particular point. Can you just imagine that? Then the limit exists. Yun ang kagandahan. No? Let's say for example, you are dalawa kayong bikers, and then you talk to each other that you are going to meet at a particular place at, let's say at Enrile, ganyan. One comes from Isabela, one comes from Cagayan. And then you will meet at a particular place. So ibig sabihin the limit do exist and it is possible. Kasi tuloy-tuloy yung highway, and then you can meet at that point. So for example, one comes from the left, one comes from the right. Then the limit do exist. You will meet each other at that point. Okay? Pero kapag may break yan, pag may break, okay, so there is a cut on the graph, does it really mean that the limit do not exist? Or the limit does not exist? Or could it also be possible that the limit exists? Okay? Kasi yung first illustration natin dyan ay agad mo naintindihan na ang limit ay nag-exist. Pero paano kapag there is a break on the graph? So, this is quite interesting now. Kasi ang mangyayari dito is you are now dealing with more than a continuous graph. Kasi ang mangyayari is you will try to observe how breaks can affect the limit. So in a piecewise function, we normally know that in a piecewise function, so let's say this one is -1. Well, wag yung sabihin na dapat perfect ang graph ko. Please be guided with the numbers I'm giving, kasi the graph, the illustration you are best guided by the illustration through the numbers. Okay? Baka mamaya sabihin nyo, sir, hindi pantay ang 1 and -1. Di ba, sir, mali ang ganun. Baka yun ang isipin nyo. Okay? Pero, again, please be guided by the numbers. So, let's say, for example, the graph in yellow is the graph of h of x. Graphically speaking, class, when you try to observe the graph of this function h, you see that there is no connection between the left and right of a particular value of x cut by this line, imaginary line. This imaginary vertical line is x is equal to -1. Nakikita mo dito mismo sa graph na magkahiwalay ang dalawang graphs kasi tendency that is a piecewise function. Pero paano siya nakakaapekto sa limit of a function? When you are now solving for a function and then for a limit of a function, and then the graph is obviously not connected, so the pieces of the graph, yan kasi yung piecewise function, the graph are cut into pieces, kaya siya piecewise function. So parang literal na ganun ang ibig sabihin. So when you are solving for the limit of h of x as x approaches -1 from the left versus the limit of function h of x as x approaches -1 from the right. So how does it affect the limit of h of x as x approaches -1? Oh, sige. Before I'll give to you the answer, may I know your answers? Please comment your answer now. I give you 20 seconds to comment your answer. And those who are in FB Live right now, you may comment your answer also, gapa. Okay? Sinadya ko mag-FB Live class kasi para mabigyan kayo ng idea na kung ano yung tinutukoy ng mga basic ideas. Introduction of the topic. So, 20 seconds, please comment your answers. May I know your answers? Okay, Matthew now commented his answer. 10 seconds. Okay, time's up. Now let's take a look on the graph. You know, class, when you are graphically answering a limit, kapag nakita mo na there is a disconnection already, yan na yung naging warning sa'yo. Kasi limit may not exist or the limit may exist. Okay? When do the limit does not exist and when do the limit exist? Please take note that the limit from the left and the limit from the right may exist. It does not necessarily mean that when the two-sided limit does not exist, that the limit from the right and the limit from the left do not exist. Okay? I would like to clarify that kasi kakasabi natin kanina that when the limit from the left and the right do exist, however they are not equal, will give you an idea that the two-sided limit does not exist actually. Okay? But the limit from the left and the limit from the right may exist, but the two-sided limit may not exist. You just need to take a look into the major condition. Kailangan nag-exist daw ang ang left at right at kailangan pareho sila. So pansinin natin kung ano nangyayari. Graphically, we observe that the behavior of h of x as x approaches negative 1 from the left, ang value ng y ay patuloy ay naging constant, pero may nakalimutan akong number. Okay? I forgot a particular number here. Let's say, for example, gawin natin itong negative 3. Hindi ko napansin. Pasensya. Okay. So, tinan nyo ang nangyayari. The limit of h of x as x approaches negative 1 from the left ay walang nagbago kay h of x. Paulit-ulit daw siya, nagiging negative 3. Or, it approaches negative 3. Pero sir, nakikita ko na open hole ito. This one is excluded. So, posibleng nasa isip mo, sir, excluded naman ito kasi hindi naman siya shaded. Eh, bakit siya negative 3? Tandaan ninyo, class, in the limit process, it does not necessarily mean that when you are referring to the x value and that is part of the domain of the given function. Pag sinabi nating limit, inoobserbahan natin kung ano ang nangyayari sa h of x habang ang x ay nalalapitan niya ang a particular value may not necessarily be part of the domain of the given function. And that is negative 3. It gets closer to negative 3. Actually, kapag sabihin kong constant function itong graph on the left of negative 1, then definitely constant. It's negative 3. Okay? So what about to the behavior of h of x as x approaches negative 1 from the right? It gets closer and closer to negative 2. Sinadya ko na yan. Yan na siya. Okay? Kaya nga dun sa enrichment activity ninyo ay nakikita nyo yung mga dot lines or the imaginary vertical and horizontal lines to give you, to guide you as to what value it refers. Okay? So that's negative 2. So, when you compare negative 3 and negative 2, first question. So, let me ask someone from the group. St. Peter din yan. Oh, si Matthew. Matthew, your answer is negative 3. Maybe hinulaan mo na lang kasi hinulaan mo. But sorry for that. I was not able to identify that y value. But yes. I know you got the point there, Matthew. Okay, let me ask someone. Oh, I want from the... Ano nangyayari dito? May bigmaan ata sa paligid. Okay, so... May I ask Emilia Andrea Maak? Here is my question to you, Miss Maak. Are you there? Hello? So, Emilia Maak is not around. Okay. Aliyah Profeta. Aliyah Joy, I have a question to you. Okay, absent. Oh, let me have... Okay, Lloyd Vinaraw. Lloyd. Oh, ito ang tanong ko sa'yo. Nag-exist ba ang limit ng left at right? Paano mo nasabing nag-exist? O, nag-exist sila. Correct. Pero ang tanong ko sa'yo, paano mo nasabi nag-exist sila? Nag-exist ang limit ng left at right. Give that one term. Ala. Yun ang intro natin kanina, Lloyd. But anyway, you answered the first question. Let me ask someone again. Genzem Siriban. It's still accepted, Lloyd, kasi you answered it correctly in the first question. But the follow-up was not able to answer. But that is accepted. Genzem Siriban, ang tanong ko sa'yo is, paano nga ba nasabi ni Lloyd na nag-exist ang limit ng dalawa? Left and right. Hala, daming tulog. Okay, actually kapag early morning ang telecon ninyo, ang gawin ninyo is you can have a coffee in front of you and para buhay na buhay kayo. Kasi kung tatanungin nyo ako, halos kagigising ko lang. Okay, medyo brush up lang tayo kasi medyo iba ang pakiramdam ko. And to tell you honestly, hindi mo na ako naligo na masyado maaga kasi medyo iba ang pakiramdam. Okay? However, yes, pero looking fresh pa rin tayo. Sana all. Okay, so, char lang. Okay, so, Carl Louis Miku. Ala, St. Peter Damian Gapa. So, kakasabi ko lang kanina, I even highlighted it. Ang laki ng font size na nilagay ko kanina. Paano natin nasasabi? O sige, o Lloyd Vinarao, o paano nag-Aven? Paano nangyari? So, they exist when they are equal? No, let me rephrase. Di ba sabi mo kanina, ang limit ng left at right ay nag-exist. So, paano mo nasabi na ang limit ng left at right ay nag-exist? Tama naman yun, pero ano ba yung dahilan? O, sige na Gavin. Arabella Dagao? Am I pronouncing it right? Arabella? Okay, very good. Because they are both real numbers. That's the answer, Lloyd. So Arabella was able to supplement you, Lloyd. So, supplement. Okay. So, you have here -3 and -2 kasi ay real numbers. So, ang ibig sabihin nito ay nag-exist. Pero kung papansinin natin, ang -3 at -2 ay hindi pareho. Since -3 from the left, limit from the left, is not equal to -2, limit from the right, then the limit of the function h of x do not exist or does not exist. DNE. So whenever you write DNE, please do not make use of equal sign. You know that is a statement form. When you're reading books, when you're reading PDFs, and even watching videos, YouTube videos, you may always encounter that there is no equal sign when you refer to not a number, sabi niya. Kasi ang pagbasahin mo kasi yan, the limit of h of x as x approaches -1 does not exist. Yun ang ibig sabihin. So, it is a statement form. Okay, I hope that's clear. If I had placed any equal sign on the enrichment activity, I was able to identify that. I am going to correct that immediately. Okay, but please be informed again that we are not using equal sign whenever we talk about DNE. So thank you, Arabella and Lloyd Vinarao, and I'm glad that you were able to identify that kasi. Okay? Now, what if so it follows now, class, that these graphs are disconnected, no? When they are approaching -1. Kasi they are naghiwalay. We call that one as sige, anyway, baka ma-overload kayo sa mga terms. Yan yung tinatawag natin discontinuity, pero meron siyang specific na pangalan. Baka ma-overload kayo, baka hindi. Okay? Pero there is also another case wherein, what if, o, diba? May paboda na naman sa kapitbahay. Okay, so, what if, okay, ito yung special case na minsan nalilito yung karamihan. Let's say this is 2. Let's say this is a graph of p of x. Okay. Wag kayo ma-deceive sa baka perfectionist kayo sa drawing pero it, uh, please be guided by the what is being illustrated by this. Okay, the dot lines. So let's say for example ang tanong dito is okay. Multiple choice type naman tayo. Sige nga, tingnan ko dito kung ano ang sagot niya dito. Let's say the question is what is the limit of p of x as x approaches to graphically? And we have the following choices. Okay, so let me give you 10 seconds. May I know? Kasi may mga ganitong example I know ay naibigay na sa lecture on the LMS week 1. What is your answer to the limit of p of x as x approaches 2? I give you 15 seconds to comment the letter of your answer. Is it A, 2, B, negative 1.5, C, does not exist, D, there is no limit? Last 10 seconds. Five seconds. Ayan, nakakatuwa ang mga sagot nyo, no? Pinag-isipan nyo ba yan? Baka may nagagayahan kayo. Okay, kasi tatangin ko kayo, paano nyo nasabi na it's letter B. So, time's up. Now, the answer of all is negative 1.5, but my major concern here is how were you able to identify the limit that is negative 1.5? So let me, is there any volunteer from you? You may raise your hand. May volunteer ba? Raise your hand if you think you can deliver the reason or the explanation why. Parang wala, no? So let me ask Markson Castillo. Markson? Markson, ano yung sagot mo? What letter is your answer? Ala, tulog kayo. Of 31 attendees. Kayo, kakaturog ka muna na. Baka yung iba sa inyo, just open ka. But anyway, I hope you're feeling okay. No? Baka may iba sa inyo is also experiencing the same as I do. I hope you're all okay. Okay, Lester Gumiran. Lester? Lester? Katurog man na sila. Yes. What is your answer? What letter is your answer? Pero kung biglayin ka sa ganyan tanong, ano yung sa tingin mo pinakaunang pipiliin mong sagot? B, negative 1.5. Bakit yun na napili mo? Kasi may pakiramdam ka na yun ang sagot? Yun ba? Okay. Okay. Okay, Lester. I know at this point you are still trying to anong tawag nila dito? To absorb the topic. That is also understandable. Okay. Excuse me. Excuse me, FB Live. Okay. Okay, so let me ask the very first one who commented his answer. Oh, Matthew, ikaw yung pinakaunang sumagot ulit. Matthew, bakit siya negative 1.5? Pero what can you say on the what can you say on the ordered pair 2 and negative 1.5? Is the ordered pair part of the graph? So what can you say? Even if they're not part of the graph, does it affect the limit? Because they seem to be approaching the same number. So okay, I am going to elaborate that. Thank you, Matthew, and that's correct. You know, that is to give you an idea, class, that even if palobat ako. Okay, so transfer lang ako ng okay, wait lang. Yes? I don't receive any answer yet. So what is P of X? I need to know that. What is P of 2? I mean, what is P of 2 pala? Dito ko malalaman kung naintindihan nyo ang undefined. This is GenMath. What is P of 2? Okay, it is undefined. Okay, i-connect natin yung mga ideas. Okay, kasi I know since the beginning, since I started teaching this basic calculus back 2018 batch. Okay, dito talaga sila nalilito. Hindi nila ma-connect ang undefined at DNE. Minsan ang sinasabi ng iba, okay, let me correct your thoughts. Baka mamaya, or your tawag dito, baka na-deceive kayo ng terms. The P of 2, the value of P of 2 is undefined on the graph kasi the graph clearly shows that P of 2, there's a hole here. So, ibig sabihin nito, kapag titignan mo ang domain nitong P of 2, when we check the domain of this P of 2, it is a set of all real numbers except 2. Yun, the set of all real numbers greater than 2. Kasi there is we see this connection, no, from 2. Yung x that is equal to 2, nakikita agad natin na disconnect na yung graph. However, okay, in the limit process, please be informed, no, all of you, na it might be true that P of 2 does not exist, sabi niya. This is true, but it does not necessarily mean that the limit does not exist. It might be true that the function is undefined at that particular value of x. Well, it does not follow, sabi niya. It does not follow that the limit of the function does not exist. Kasi ang ibig sabihin ng limit, we are just talking about how does y behaves. Saan papunta ang value ng y? At nakikita natin na ang value ng y ay papunta sa 1.5. Kaya ang sagot ay negative 1.5. You see? Nag-exist. Pero ang P of 2 undefined. Kasi checking out the domain, 2 is not part of the domain. Okay? So, if the limit of P of x as x approaches 2 is negative 1.5, then it follows again, ulitin ko ito kasi pagdating ng quiz baka kung ito pa yung naging dahilan ng wrong answers niya, hindi ko na talaga alam. Okay? So the limit from the left is also negative 1.5 and the limit from the right is also negative 1.5. So when do we say that the limit of the function does not exist graphically? Then ang tendency nito is when we don't see any connection between the two graphs from the left and right. When they do not connect, at eksakto pa na yung value ng x na yun ay yung mismong dahilan ng hindi pag-connect, then the limit of the function does not exist talaga. Katulad na nakikita ninyo dito sa graph ng yellow. Nag-connect ba? Nag-connect ba ang graph na ito from negative 1x that is negative 1 to... Can we see them connected from each other? No. Okay? There is a disconnection. Pero ang nakikita nyo sa graph ni P of X, can you see them connected? Okay, in the idea of limit process, yes, they are. Because they are approaching the same number, and that is negative 1.5. But when it comes to the idea of the graph of the function itself, they are disconnected, sir. Kasi P of 2 is undefined at that case. Pero lagi niyong pakatandaan na kapag sinabi nating limit na, if they both move at a particular number, they both, left and right, both moves or get closer to that particular number, and that number is the limit. Kaya nga nangyari dyan, ang limit ay 1.5, negative 1.5. Okay? Okay, just last portion lang kasi it's already time. Ito yung sinasabi natin na when does the limit does not exist and when do the limit exist. Okay, on the two-sided, I'm referring to two-sided. Please bear with the graph kasi again, ganun talaga when I'm using notepad, medyo paiba-ibahan ka ng ano. Okay, kapag naghiwalay ang dalawang graph, katulad nito, yung isa papunta dito, pero yung isa naman ay papunta dyan. And then let's say this is 2. So, ang mangyari dito, D and E yan. When it comes to the limit of the function as x approaches, let's say that is function f of x. As x approaches 2, the limit does not exist. Why? They are disconnected. However, when it comes to other illustration wherein this is disconnected siya dito, and then excuse me, o ganyan, o let's say pag ganyan, o dito undefined siya dito. Pero when it comes to the limit, let's say for example this is g of x, and let's say this is negative 3. So the limit of g of x as x approaches negative 3, let's say for example this is 1, the answer is 1. Bakit 1? Kasi left and right both move to the same value, that is 1. And then when you are asked what is g of negative 3, the answer is undefined. No equal sign, sorry. That must be in the statement for g of negative 3 is undefined. And that is graphically speaking, class. Graphically speaking, ganyan talaga yung nangyayari.